There is a magnesium mistake I see in older adults over and over again, and it is far more dangerous than most people realize. It does not begin with a dramatic collapse. It begins with little things that seem harmless: a few skipped meals, a stronger blood pressure pill, a reflux medication you have taken for years, more fatigue, a few leg cramps at night, a strange flutter in the chest you decide not to mention. Then one day your blood pressure climbs, your heart feels off, your balance is not what it was, and you are suddenly much closer to a stroke than you understand. I'm Dr. Michael Joel, and what I'm about to show you could change how you protect your brain for the rest of your life. Please subscribe today and join our community so I can keep helping you protect your heart, brain, and independence daily. Because this conversation is not really about a supplement bottle. It is about a silent gap between what your body needs and what your routine is taking away. And that gap gets wider with age. That is what makes this so serious. Magnesium helps regulate blood pressure, muscle and nerve function, blood sugar, and normal heart rhythm. When it drifts too low, even gradually, several stroke risk pathways can start moving in the wrong direction at the same time. Not all at once, but quietly enough that many seniors mistake the warning signs for normal aging. Let me tell you about Dolores from St. Petersburg, Florida, because her story reveals how this starts. Dolores was 74, a retired elementary school librarian, sharp as a tack, proud of the fact that she never missed a doctor's appointment. She took her blood pressure medicine every morning, her acid reflux pill every night, and she believed she was doing everything right. But over the course of 6 months, she began waking up with calf cramps, afternoon fatigue, and a heavy, washed-out feeling she could not explain. She thought, maybe I'm just getting older. Then her blood pressure started rising, even though she was taking her medication exactly as prescribed. That is when the real danger began. What scared Dolores was not one single symptom. It was the pattern. She started feeling her heart skip occasionally while folding laundry. She felt weaker climbing the stairs in her townhouse. Once, while shopping at a grocery store outside Tampa, she grabbed the cart because she felt lightheaded for a second. Still, she did what most people do. She explained it away. Too little sleep. Not enough water. Maybe stress. But here is what was actually happening. Her body was being nudged toward instability from multiple directions. The reflux medicine reduced magnesium absorption over time. The diuretic she took for blood pressure increased losses. And the diet she thought was healthy was low in magnesium-rich foods. That is the mistake almost every senior makes. They assume magnesium is something you either take or do not take. That is not the real issue. The real issue is depletion. Magnesium can be leaking out of your system or failing to come in at the level you need while your life looks completely normal from the outside. And when magnesium runs low, the effects are not limited to cramps or sleep problems. Blood vessels can tighten more easily. Blood pressure can become harder to control. Blood sugar can worsen. Heart rhythm can become less stable. Each one of those changes matters. Together, they can create exactly the kind of internal environment that sets the stage for stroke. Before I show you the biggest version of this mistake, you need to understand why magnesium matters so much in the first place. It is involved in hundreds of processes inside the body. Your muscles use it. Your nerves use it. Your heart depends on it. Your blood vessels respond to it. Your cells use it when they make energy. So when someone tells me, Doctor, I'm just a little low, I immediately pay attention because little shortages in the body rarely stay little for long, especially after 60. Your body can compensate for a while. Then one system starts wobbling, then another, and suddenly the person who looked mostly fine last year is dealing with higher blood pressure, lower energy, poorer balance, and more cardiac symptoms. Now, here is what makes this even trickier. A lot of seniors think magnesium deficiency announces itself dramatically. They imagine severe twitching, seizures, or unmistakable signs. Sometimes that happens in extreme cases, but most of the time the early picture is much quieter. It looks like reduced appetite, nausea, fatigue, weakness, trouble sleeping, night cramps, constipation in some people, loose stools in others if they are taking the wrong supplement. It can look like anxiety, restlessness, or that vague sense that your body is under strain for reasons you cannot name. That is why so many Americans over 60 walk around with magnesium problems hiding in plain sight. The symptoms are real, but they are nonspecific enough to be ignored. Let me give you the first hidden trap, because once you hear it, you will start noticing it everywhere. Trap number 6 is believing that if you are not cramping, your magnesium must be fine. I hear this all the time. I don't have leg cramps, doctor, so I'm probably okay. No. Cramps are only one possible clue, not a guarantee. I had a patient named Robert in Columbus, Ohio, 71 years old, who never cramped once. What he had instead was stubborn blood pressure and this constant low-level fatigue that made him stop walking with his wife in the evenings. He felt slower, weaker, less steady. He thought he was just out of shape. But his routine had changed. More processed food, less beans, fewer greens, and a stronger water pill. Robert's story matters because it teaches a brutal lesson. Your body does not always send the warning in the area you expect. Sometimes magnesium issues appear in sleep, sometimes in mood, sometimes in bowel habits, sometimes in blood pressure, sometimes in the rhythm of the heart. And if the only symptom you are waiting for is a dramatic nighttime cramp, you can miss the entire process while your stroke risk is quietly building through other mechanisms. That is why I tell seniors not to look for one classic symptom. Look for patterns, look for combinations. Look for the person whose blood pressure is getting harder to control, whose energy is worse, whose heart feels more irritable, and whose diet has become narrower over the years. That combination matters. Trap number 5 is assuming blood pressure is only a sodium story. Yes, salt matters. Of course it does. But blood pressure is not controlled by sodium alone, and that misunderstanding gets seniors into trouble. I met Patricia in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 68 years old, who had become absolutely militant about avoiding salt. She bought low-sodium soups, low-sodium crackers, low-sodium frozen meals, and she congratulated herself every time the label looked clean. But her blood pressure was still drifting up. Why? Because many of the foods she replaced her old diet with were still highly processed and poor in magnesium. She removed one pressure problem while keeping another. And that is very common in America, especially when convenience foods slowly take over retirement. What Patricia needed was not just less sodium. She needed more real food that brought magnesium with it. Beans, nuts, seeds, whole grains, leafy greens, yogurt. Foods that do more than lower one number on a label. Foods that support the actual chemistry of blood vessel relaxation and metabolic stability. But instead, she had been trying to solve a biology problem with packaging. The result was frustration. Her blood pressure medicine was increased. She felt tired. She became afraid of eating the wrong thing. And nobody had explained that some older adults are not just overeating harmful foods. They are undereating protective ones. That gap is where the magnesium mistake grows. And once blood pressure starts climbing, stroke risk is no longer abstract. It becomes immediate and personal. Trap number 4 is medication blindness. This one terrifies me because the people making this mistake are often the most responsible. They are taking exactly what they were told to take. Linda from Phoenix, Arizona was 76 and unbelievably disciplined. Pill organizer, calendar reminders, refill alarms. She never missed a dose. She was on a proton pump inhibitor for reflux and a thiazide diuretic for blood pressure. Over time, she developed weakness, palpitations, and rising blood pressure, despite being compliant with her regimen. She thought compliance should have protected her. But compliance without monitoring can still leave you vulnerable. Some medications reduce magnesium absorption. Others increase urinary loss. The medication is not evil. The danger is failing to notice what it is slowly changing in the background. And here is where seniors get trapped emotionally. If a prescription came from the doctor, they feel guilty even wondering whether it could be contributing to a problem. So they stay silent. They do not ask whether their reflux medicine could affect magnesium over the long term. They do not ask whether their diuretic could be pulling out more than just extra fluid. They do not ask whether their exhaustion, their irregular heartbeat, or their harder to control blood pressure might be connected. And that silence is costly. Because low magnesium can make blood pressure treatment feel less effective, while also making the heart more electrically unstable. That is an ugly combination. A vessel problem plus a rhythm problem. And if you are over 60, that is not a combination you can afford to ignore. Trap number 3 is believing any magnesium supplement will fix the problem. This is where the internet misleads people. Seniors hear that magnesium is important, so they grab the first bottle they see at a pharmacy in Des Moines or a warehouse club in Houston. They take it for a week, get diarrhea, and conclude magnesium is not for them. Or they take a cheap, poorly absorbed form and assume their problem is solved because the label says 400 milligrams in big letters. But the body is not impressed by big letters. It responds to what it can actually absorb and use. And if you are taking something that upsets your gut or interacts badly with your routine, the supplement can become one more source of confusion instead of help. I remember Harold from Knoxville, Tennessee, age 72. He started magnesium on his own because a neighbor told him it would lower his blood pressure fast. Instead, he developed loose stools, stopped taking it, and decided supplements were a scam. But the real problem was not magnesium itself. It was the unsupervised guesswork. No review of kidney function, no discussion of which form made sense. No look at his medications. No attention to dose. He wanted a fast fix for a slow depletion problem. And when that fix failed, he gave up on the whole idea. That is common. Seniors are either oversold or undersupported. Nobody explains that magnesium can help some people, not all people, and that the right question is not, should everyone take magnesium? The right question is, why is your body struggling with it in the first place? Trap number 2 is assuming your normal routine is enough just because it has not changed in years. This one is subtle. Your routine may feel the same, but your body is not the same body it was at 45. Appetite shifts, kidney function changes, activity changes. Food variety often narrows. Cooking becomes simpler. A spouse dies and meals become smaller. Dental issues make crunchy foods like nuts harder to eat. Grocery habits become repetitive. Suddenly, the foods that once covered your nutritional needs are gone, and you do not notice because nothing changed overnight. It changed gradually. I saw this in Nancy from Omaha, Nebraska, 79 years old, who lived alone after her husband passed away. Breakfast was toast. Lunch was crackers and cheese. Dinner was soup. Easy, familiar, and far too low in magnesium. Nancy did not think of herself as someone with a nutrition problem. She thought of herself as someone who ate light. But light eating is not the same as sufficient eating, especially when the foods are refined and repetitive. Over the next year, her blood pressure edged up, her blood sugar worsened, and she started feeling occasional flutters in her chest at bedtime. Nothing dramatic enough to cause alarm, but that is exactly how seniors drift toward danger. A mineral gap becomes a blood vessel problem. A blood vessel problem becomes a stroke risk problem. A rhythm issue appears and now you have two roads leading toward the same cliff. The body does not care whether the shortage happened from poor choices or loneliness or convenience. It only responds to the shortage. And that is why retirement routines deserve medical attention too. Now we arrive at mistake number 1, the biggest and most dangerous magnesium error seniors make. They focus on adding magnesium before they ask what is draining it out of them every single day. That is the mistake. Not just ignoring magnesium, misunderstanding the whole problem. Because if you never identify the drain, you end up pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You take a supplement, feel slightly better, then worse again. You eat a salad for 2 days and think you handled it. Meanwhile, the reflux medication continues, the diuretic continues, the processed diet continues, the diabetes continues, the alcohol at night continues, the poor intake continues. And the stroke risk pathways continue too. Higher blood pressure, worse glucose control, greater electrical irritability in the heart, more vascular strain. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. George from Dayton, Ohio, 77 years old, had 3 things happening at once. First, his doctor had increased a water pill because his blood pressure was running high. Second, he had been taking omeprazole for years without ever revisiting whether he still needed it daily. Third, after his wife died, his diet became mostly canned chili, toast, deli turkey, and cookies. He was not reckless. He was grieving and tired and trying to get through the day. Over 9 months, he developed weakness, occasional palpitations, and blood pressure that was harder to control even with more medicine. He thought the answer was another prescription, but the deeper answer was that his system was being depleted from multiple angles at once. George never had a stroke, and thank God for that, but he was moving toward one. That is the phrase I want you to remember. Moving toward one. Stroke risk is often built long before stroke symptoms appear. It builds through pressure on the arteries. It builds through plaque-promoting damage. It builds through poor metabolic control. It builds through rhythms that can become chaotic enough to form clots. And when I see a senior with worsening blood pressure, lower energy, dietary decline, and meds that can affect magnesium, I do not wait for catastrophe before I pay attention. I start asking different questions. What are you eating? What medications have been added? How long have you been on them? What symptoms began afterward? That is where the real diagnosis often starts, not in the supplement aisle. There is another part of this that seniors need to hear. Waiting for your body to scream is not a safe strategy. A lot of older adults say, if it were serious, I'd know. No, not always. High blood pressure is often silent. Early rhythm instability can be intermittent. Magnesium inadequacy can simmer for months or years before it becomes obvious. And by the time it becomes obvious, the consequences may already be expensive. More medications, more appointments, more weakness, more fear. The body gives whispers before it gives alarms. Your job after 60 is to respect the whispers, especially if you live in the United States, where convenience food, chronic stress, acid reflux medications, diabetes, and blood pressure pills are incredibly common. That is not a moral failing. It is the environment. But it means you have to be smarter, not just more obedient. So what should you actually do? Let me give you the practical framework. First, do not self-diagnose every symptom as magnesium. That would be a mistake too. Fatigue can mean many things. Palpitations can mean many things. Weakness can mean many things. But if you are over 60 and you have blood pressure issues, diabetes, reflux medication, diuretics, a limited diet, or night cramps, then magnesium deserves to be part of the conversation. Second, review your medication list with your doctor or pharmacist specifically through the lens of magnesium depletion and interactions. Not generally, specifically. Third, look honestly at your diet, not your intentions, not the foods you buy for guests. The foods you actually eat in a normal week. That truth is usually more revealing than any supplement ad. Fourth, prioritize food before fantasy. Magnesium-rich eating patterns are not glamorous, but they are powerful. More beans, more nuts and seeds if you can chew them safely, more whole grains instead of only refined ones. More leafy greens in forms you will actually eat. More yogurt if it fits your health needs. More real meals and fewer beige convenience foods. Because when magnesium comes packaged inside a healthier pattern, you are helping blood pressure, weight, blood sugar, and vascular health all at the same time. A bottle cannot do that by itself. And that is where many seniors waste precious time. They search for the miracle mineral when what they really need is a daily pattern their blood vessels can trust. Fifth, if you are considering a supplement, do it thoughtfully. This is not the place for blind megadosing. Too much supplemental magnesium can cause diarrhea, nausea, abdominal cramping, and in extreme circumstances, dangerous heart effects, especially if kidney function is impaired. That matters a lot in older adults. If you have kidney disease, significant heart rhythm problems, or a complex medication list, do not freelance this. Talk with your clinician first. And if you do use magnesium under appropriate guidance, remember that the point is not to chase some magical feeling overnight. The point is to correct a vulnerability that has been quietly working against your heart and brain. That is slower, less exciting, and much more real. Now let me tell you what I wish every senior understood about stroke prevention. It is rarely one giant heroic act. It is not one vitamin. It is not one emergency visit. It is not one perfect blood pressure reading. It is the removal of quiet daily pressures before they accumulate into damage. Magnesium matters because it sits at a crossroads. Blood pressure, blood sugar, vessel tone, heart rhythm, energy production. If that crossroads is unstable, several problems can lead in the same dangerous direction. That does not mean magnesium alone causes or prevents stroke. Absolutely not. But it does mean that ignoring magnesium depletion, especially while the rest of your cardiovascular risks are rising, is like ignoring a loose lug nut on a highway trip. Maybe nothing happens today, but you are increasing the odds of disaster. I want to speak for a moment to the viewer who is watching this alone in a quiet living room somewhere in Michigan or Nevada or South Carolina and thinking, this sounds like me. If that is you, do not panic. Panic helps nothing, but do not brush it off either. If you have been feeling more weak, more crampy, more irregular in the chest, more frustrated by blood pressure, or more limited in what you eat, then let this be your turning point. Let this be the moment you stop calling it old age and start calling it information. Because old age is not an explanation. It is a stage of life that requires better explanations. And once you get the right explanation, your next step becomes clearer, calmer, and much safer. I also need to say this because families watch these videos too. If you have a parent or grandparent who lives on toast, canned soup, antacids, and pills, please do not assume they are fine just because they look tidy and independent. Some of the most vulnerable seniors I know are the ones who appear the most put together. They keep the house clean. They smile at church. They say they are doing fine. But underneath, their diet has collapsed, their medication burden has grown, and their body is compensating harder than anyone realizes. One of the kindest things you can do is not just ask, how are you? Ask, what have you been eating? Ask, have your medicines changed? Ask, have you been getting cramps, weakness, or fluttering? Those questions can change outcomes, especially before stroke changes everything. Before we finish, let me bring Dolores back because her story has an ending you need to hear. Once we reviewed her routine, the picture became obvious. Her medications needed a closer look. Her diet needed rebuilding. Her symptoms needed to be treated as connected instead of random. She did not need fear. She needed clarity. Over time, with proper follow-up, better nutrition, and a more thoughtful plan, her blood pressure became more stable, the cramps eased, and the lightheaded episodes stopped. What changed her life was not one miracle capsule. It was finally understanding that her body had been under a mineral strain she did not see. That realization gave her back a sense of control. And for seniors, control is not a luxury. It is part of independence. So here's the sentence I want ringing in your mind after this video ends. The magnesium mistake is not simply failing to take magnesium. The magnesium mistake is failing to notice what is draining it, failing to see the symptoms early, and failing to understand that this quiet depletion can push blood pressure, blood sugar, and heart rhythm closer to the kind of instability that prepares the body for stroke. That is the truth. And once you know it, you cannot unsee it, which is a good thing because awareness is what allows prevention. You do not need to become obsessed. You need to become attentive. That is very different. Obsession creates anxiety. Attention creates action. And action is what protects the brain. If this opened your eyes, share it with a senior you love, especially someone with high blood pressure, diabetes, reflux pills, or nighttime cramps. And stay with this channel because my mission is simple. I want to help you cut through noise, catch the problems that get dismissed, and protect the years of life you have worked so hard to reach. Your brain deserves better than silent risk. Your heart deserves better than guesswork. And you deserve better than being told everything is just age. Take care of yourself, ask better questions this week, and I will see you in the next video.